Welcome back. Today we're gonna take a look at how much of a difference overclocking makes to the performance you get in ArmA 3. We're gonna start with my hardware. My hardware is an i5 3570K and a GTX 660 Ti. It's an older graphics card that could be bottlenecking the processor, but I'm not quite sure about that. So, let's start. The game is tested at 3 GHz, 3.5 GHz, 4 GHz and 4.5 GHz. Fraps was used to benchmark the game. All the benchmarks were made on a deathmatch server, which you can see in the background, with consistent 20 players on it, or about 20-25 players, something like that. As you can see here, at 4 GHz, the maximum frame rate is quite a bit higher. That's because I was testing it on a multiplayer server, and obviously not all the things are the same when you're playing in multiplayer. When using lower clock speeds, a lot more stutter occurred. As you can see in the minimum graphs, there were a lot lower minimum FPS, like 9 FPS for example, at 3.5 GHz, and this is probably the only thing that happened until 3 GHz, because until 3 GHz the average frame rate stayed basically the same. So let's come to the conclusion. Overclocking does make a difference, especially with a low clock processor like for example a Core 2 Quad, which is clocked at 2.3 GHz or maybe 3 GHz maximum. But with an i5, especially with a modern i5 like a Skylake i5 6400, 6500, something like that, it doesn't make much of a difference. But I've had an i7 940, which is one of the first i7 chips, and this chip was clocked at 3 GHz stock. And when I overclocked it to 3.5 GHz, the frame rate was nearly doubled. So if you're experiencing frame drops, it could be related to your hard drive, but in my case all was tested on an SSD and there were still some frame drops. When you overclock you get a more constant frame rate, but you don't get a higher frame rate. So that's the thing you have to remember. Thank you for watching my video. Have a nice day. Goodbye.